By the dead and living gods, it is the manling. Alive yet? We must tell his lordship.
Oh, look, an itsy-bitsy, eensy-weensy... Yeah? Well, get about your business, mortal, and... Pink skin, intruder, alarms. Clanfear not scared of sneaky pink skin. Clanfear smart. Clanfear talks and talks and talks with pink skin. Soon, plenty of Clanfear, yes. You waits here, yes?
I will speak to you simply and directly in the matter of your race. Perhaps you first need lessons in civility before we should treat further. You have tried my patience. I have no desire to speak with you.
Pink skin, intruder, alarm, clan.
Yes. You have gotten this far against considerable opposition. Therefore, you are able to protect yourself. You are talking to us. Therefore, you have something to sell. We will hear your plea, simple and direct. Then we will consider your appeal or call your bluff. You overestimate the inconvenience you have caused me and overvalue your status in negotiations with an immortal lord. I am willing to overlook your gaucheries as a feature of your youth and inexperience. I suggest you withdraw to reconsider your appeal. Yes. 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 You have gotten this far. You over... Yes. Yes. You have gotten this far against considerable... You over... Yes.
Why have I been kept waiting? Lord Dagon will wish to see me immediately. The portents are most propitious. But a crisis is coming, and he will wish to take the tides at their flood. This is unacceptable. This is but the calm before the storm. The tides of magic are at the remotest ebb. His lordship must be prepared to ride them at the flood, or all may be lost. See here. My name is Siranangada. I'm a mortal sorcerer. Listen, knave, and cease your prattle. My lord Jagar Tharn, the mortal emperor of Tamriel, and your lord Dagon are ordering affairs high above your counsel. Tell someone in authority that I must speak with his lordship. Good. Good. You can think after a fashion. Yes, Tamriel believes that Uriel Septem still rules, but in fact, my master Jagar Tharn has taken the form of the Emperor and rules in his stead. Lord Dagon was instrumental in assisting my master in this imposture, and, as partial recompense, my master has temporarily placed my not inconsiderable skills in reading the vagaries of the Magica tides at your master's disposal. And it is this very counsel that your master so earnestly desires that you are keeping from him by your silly questions. Listen. The fate of the realms and all that is in them is affected by the ebb and flow of Magica. Out there, in the void, the waters of Oblivion have receded far from the shores of the mortal and immortal realms. If, by your feckless inanity and indolence, you fail to carry this message to Lord Dagon, and thereby squander the precious wisdom that might be used to shape the destinies of all the mortal and immortal realms, I believe Lord Dagon may use your mouth, and indeed your entire alimentary canal, as a fit and handy receptacle for his terrible and swift sword of destruction. What? What? Oh, dear. But you can't just kill me in cold blood. What about due process? My rights as a noble.
Thank you for coming. I regret the disturbance you've caused, though in your place I might have thought it excusable. I dare say that by mortal standards all this must seem an unsettled existence. Well, you are not here for an extended stay. I have a proposal to make, but before I do, are there any questions you'd like to ask? In taking Battlespire, our clan has overreached its resources and judgments. A time of change is coming. It is written in the firmament, and it is time to make fast and conserve our realm, not to extend our grasp. Battlespire is a rich resource, and will be coveted by other clans. We do not need such distractions, especially as the storms of change come upon us. Is that clear? Certainly. What else do you wish to know? Mortals are short-lived, ignorant, and feeble by contrast with the daedra. But you mortals are also potent engines of change and innovation, of desperate and reckless improvisation and industry. Thus do we so prize the fruits of your mundane and arcane engineering. Thus do we bargain and plunder and steal to gain these treasures. We have lived too long, and grow dull and complacent. You live too short, and so are wonderfully sharp and inventive. Does that make sense? Certainly. What else? You think I am ambitious? My interest is purely in the welfare of the clan. Dagon's tolerance of the antics of Zivilai and Phaedra, and his acceptance of the clanless seducers into the inner councils of our clan, are an unfortunate divergence from Dagon's otherwise prudent policies. It would be better if my lord and his most wayward lieutenants were to take a short vacation while I restore Clan Dagon to its normal stability. Is that clear? Certainly. What else do you wish to know? Phaedra's clan represents the vital but impulsive and undisciplined element of the destructive principle. Zivilai's clan represents the ambitious but occasionally overreaching and imprudent side of destruction. I and my vassal lords and the Dremora clan represent the principle of destruction as evolution, aspiring to arts and powers of ever-increasing potency and aesthetic refinement. The seducers are masterless daedra, cast adrift by the failed fortunes of their lords, and recently accepted, much against my counsel, into Lord Dagon's service. Is that clear? Certainly. What else do you wish to know? Here's my proposal. I will give you the neonymics of Phaedra, Zivilai, and Lord Dagon. Do you know what a neonymic is and what it signifies? You are correct in general. Actually, the incantation of the neonymic drains the vital force from an immortal, forcing him to follow that force into oblivion. There, one abides until the vital force is replenished. The experience is somewhat analogous to sleep for mortals. However, sleep is a normal experience for mortals. It is not a normal experience for an immortal. Suffice it to say that it is as close to the terror and despair of death as an immortal can come. You will use those neonymics to cast them into oblivion for the present. For reward, you shall have your life, and the life of your companion. When Dagon is cast into the void, you may take his amulet of entry, pass into the ward sigil that hangs in his sanctuary, and thus be teleported back to Battlespire, where you may pass through his sigil there and return to Tamriel. Does that satisfy you? Dagon's incantory neonymic is Jekeleho Debe Efehezepe. Zibalai's neonymic, Wegarose Chekohu. Phaedra's neonymic, Nepekwe Kodo. I will give you a document bearing the appropriate neonymic, the Daedric characters, the transliteration into Tamrielic, and a phonetic transcription to help you pronounce the phrases effectively. You have to trust me. You have no choice. I appreciate that. It must be very unpleasant. And now, here is one of the 3 keys to the gate. When all 3 keys are placed in the gate lantern in the center of the chamber, this gate will carry you to Lord Dagon's hunting lodge, where your friend is held. And the other 2 keys are held by Phaedra Sharde and Zibalai Moab, so I know your path must cross theirs. They are your gods, mortal, and none of my affair. There is no reason for us to speak further. It has been a pleasure to meet you. Perhaps we shall meet again someday. Farewell, and good fortune, mortal.
Yes. Yes. You have gotten this far against considerable opposition. Therefore, you are able to protect yourself. You are talking to us. Therefore, you have something to sell. We will hear your plea, simple and direct. Then we will consider your appeal or call your bluff. Who gave you my neonymic? I misjudged Phaedra. I wonder how she discovered my neonymic. Very well. I shall require an oath to the powers that you will never reveal the neonymic to another soul. Ah, yes, of course. You will never reveal my neonymic to any soul save myself. In return, you shall have the gate key to Dagon's hunting lodge and a secret safe conduct from my clan. Here is the gate key. I shall issue orders to my clan immediately. I believe I shall comfort myself with the conquest of Battlespire and be grateful to have you out of my way at so modest a price. And now, if you will excuse me, my clan and I have some pressing business with the Charday clan and its honor-stained leader.
By the dead and living gods!
Oh, look, an itsy bit. Yeah? Well, get about your business.